Welcome to the second day of the third UN Open Science Conference organized by the UN Library and in collaboration also with colleagues from the Department of Economic and Social Affairs and UNESCO. I want to offer a special welcome to our colleagues and friends that are tuning in online. I also want to say that yesterday in the first panel, there was so much interest and there was so much question, which I hold here. And I have been going through since last night, and we will revert on these questions with the support of the speakers back to our online audiences, perhaps using the registration list. I think from yesterday, it was very interesting to see how quickly we covered the gap between the second UN Open Science Conference to this one, to pinpoint and highlight some core challenges, and when I say challenges, I also mean opportunities, that we are facing in the open science movement. And I think it's a great opportunity for us in the next 2 days to come up with some suggestions, ideas, recommendations. As I mentioned, there's going to be an outcome document, which we hope will help libraries, publishers, UNESCO, the UN, get into become more active in certain areas in case this is not the case. So the 3 areas that we recognized yesterday, and I say again, it was really fast that we ended up in those 3 areas, is the need to reform scientific publishing. And we're delighted because there are actually 3 panels on reforming scientific publishing, 1 today and 2 tomorrow. So there's plenty of discussions there. The second was the need to change the culture or alter the research assessment or the academic reward system. It comes with many names. And again, we have distinguished members of academia in the panels. And I think this is something that we should, again, look into with ideas. Could be blue sky thinking at this point as well, which is always very interesting. And finally, the intellectual property rights and the copyright regime and so on, and how we could offer some suggestions in that front. We have also invited colleagues from the WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization, and I know they're tuning in online. So there's plenty of room for ideas. For this second day of the conference, I will pass the MOC role, the Master of Ceremony, so to speak, role, to my colleague Anna from UNESCO, who's going to guide us through the keynotes and the panels. So, Anna, over to you.
Thank you, Thanos. Thank you very much for the introduction to the day. I will do my best to keep us all in time like you did yesterday. So I'm very happy that we have very interesting discussions in front of us today. We have excellent speakers, excellent panels, and again, we have an audience of some 3,000 people, both here in the room and connected. And as Thanos said, we really are looking forward to some ideas for the future. I think we have identified the issues. Now the question is, how can we move forward? What are some of the possible actions? What are some of the things that are actually already happening? What are the easy solutions? What are the less easy solutions? And we can kind of try to capture that then in the end in our outcome document, which, as Thanos said, will then be used for a variety of other purposes. And on our side in UNESCO, we really want to use it, again, to advance the implementation of the recommendation and maybe help us to provide, again, some guiding principles or some standards around some of these 3 key areas, which indeed are key areas for the advancement of open science globally. So thank you all again for the excellent participation yesterday and all the excellent inputs. And I'm not going to be too long. I'm actually very happy that today we have excellent keynote and our moderator who will be helping us in moderating the discussions this morning. So I'm going to hand it over now to Ms. Laura Hanscorn, who is the Head of Scholarly Communications and Collection Strategy at MIT Libraries. Laura, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna. And many thanks to the UN Libraries and UNESCO for organizing this event and for the opportunity to be here among so many people in the room and online that I personally admire and we at MIT have been inspired by. And many thanks to the administrative and technical staff here that have been working hard to make this international hybrid conference such a welcoming event. I know that is not an easy task. In the first day, we have already touched on many points that we talk about often at MIT. Equity in the scholarly communications ecosystem, the problems with prestige overall, publisher profits, copyright and intellectual property, incentive structures, the importance of data stewardship, and how the current publish or perish system has contributed to a decline of quality of scholarship in certain venues. This becomes more apparent as disciplines become aware of how the reproducibility crisis manifests in their areas. Funders get better at quantifying the amount of money that is being wasted, and the public becomes more aware of the human costs of continuing the status quo. We very much agree with Thanos' statement yesterday that libraries have a critical role to play in improving this situation. I'm also heartened by the ideas that have been discussed already. Many of them we are already putting into practice at MIT. One example being we have combined our collection strategy, scholarly communications, licensing, and repository services into one department to help us focus on making MIT scholarship more openly available to the world and to better align our collections budget, what we spend money on, with the values of the libraries and the mission of MIT to bring knowledge to bear on the world's greatest challenges. We work to make our values reflected in the licenses that we sign, and that our repositories are resourced in a way that we are providing meaningful access to the scholarship created by the MIT community. Since the faculty open access policy was unanimously passed in 2009, nearly 60% of all faculty articles have been deposited into our institutional repository. At MIT, we were big on hacking the system, but this achievement represents appropriately resourcing our repository infrastructure and the multiple people needed to make it successful. We have some hacks if you want to save some money. You can talk to me about that later if you like. We have also experimented with all kinds of business models for scholarly communications, large and small. We want something that supports our values, but we are also pragmatists. We want something that works, and we want it to represent quality, but quality as we understand it. And by far, our experience in this explorations have led us to prefer opportunities that have a component focusing on repositories and or where the model is diamond, meaning that there are no charges to read or for an author to publish, and this can take many forms. Diamond open access is something that was mentioned multiple times in yesterday's session. And for this and many other reasons, I'm so pleased to be moderating this particular keynote. I very much admire the work of our next speaker, and it is an excellent example of how Mexico and the countries in Latin and South America in general have long been leading the way in open access and have already created a model where science is seen as a public good. And for just a flavor of Dr. Arianna Becerril Garcia's achievements, she is part of the founding team of the scientific information system Redalyc.org, which, as its tagline says, is a diamond open access scientific journal network, non-commercial global infrastructure owned by academia. And she is currently their executive director. She is founder and president of Amalica, and she is co-founder of Red Mexicana de Repositorios Institucionales, and was understandably asked to help shape the open access national legislation in Mexico in 2014. She was an inaugural founding steering member of the Invest in Open Infrastructure organization, some organization you should definitely check out if you're not familiar with, and is currently a professor of the Autonomous University of the State of Mexico and received the 2021 Early Career Scientist Award for South America and the Caribbean, awarded by the International Science Council. Please join me in warmly welcoming Arianna. And for our community members online, please put any questions you may have in the chat, and at the end of the presentation, we will bring these to our attention, as well as the questions that there may be on the floor. Arianna, the actual and virtual floor is yours.
I always wanted to use one of these. I think today is a good day for doing that. Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation. Really, for me, it's a great opportunity, well, to see many known faces and new ones. And thank you for the opportunity. And today, I would like to, and please allow me to be a little bit disruptive this morning. To share this presentation, and let me address open science from the perspective of commons. And in this sense, I would like to perhaps invite you to reflect and make some exercises on comparing and contrast, because we are living in a world of lights and shadows regarding open science. And I would like to talk from the experience, lessons learned from 20 years working with non-commercial open access journals in Latin America, now working in the Global South in general. So I really believe we need to know each other. We need to understand perhaps and value what is happening in other parts of the world that sometimes is not seen, is not known. But I really believe that this kind of approaches are more or are closer to the science as commons approach. So, and I would like to start by saying or by quoting just a small extract from the Budapest Open Access Initiative, which is obvious and very all well known for all of you. But just to remind the essence and the spirit of open access, that the old tradition and a new technology have converged to make possible an unprecedented public good. So the public good was at the spirit of the Budapest Open Access Initiative. And for us, from our work, we see open science as a unique opportunity to really achieve science as a global public good. And if we put this in mind and really align our decisions, strategies, investments, and everyday step with this in mind, really we can build something better than perhaps the current scholarly ecosystem worldwide. However, we live in a world of contrast, as I said before, and many concerns from the perspective of the commons have been raised. First of all, because we are seeing a huge consolidation of the science as commodity approach. We are seeing increasing control of knowledge production and communication circuit by commercial corporations. We are seeing, for example, restrictions on the rise, restrictions on where, when, or how to deposit. The publishing transition to digital technologies is both slow and sometimes disappointing in the scientific communication sector. We are also facing a very damaging research assessment system with a lot of good initiatives that really brings hope to the equation currently, but many things are on the table. We also have seen the refusal, for example, to adopt author retention rights by many publishers. So it is not only to open and to have an article open, because behind that are a lot of hidden restrictions that compromise the future of scholarly and academia. So this is very important to have in mind when we make decisions about open science. We are also seeing the consolidation of the oligopoly as a result of the, this flip to read and publish and transformative agreements. So the disruptive, and let me just quote this, disruptive transformation in open science from this approach has been only change the person who is going to be in charge of paying. So we flip from reader's fee to author's fee. We change the exclusion to another part of the circuit, but we are still keeping the exclusion and the inequity in the sector. So this is very concerning because we are not doing something better. And really open science has the potential to really redraw our landscape, and this is not happening in many parts of the world. So, and the problem is that the ownership and control is still in hands of commercial corporations. And don't take me wrong, the problem is not the profit, the problem is the control, the problem is who is going to be, or who is going to have the control of the future decision making in the future. And also in that approach, there is a global, underrepresentation of the global South. So transformative agreements, and I apologize for saying that because I know that sometimes these are sold like the solution, are not compliant with the science as a global public good approach. And I'm using my hat as a researcher from the global South, and I really have suffered from this exclusion, and transformative agreements haven't solved this problem. So we believe that we are not learning from history, so we are condemned to repeat it. We are really repeating the errors from the subscription model. It is a model that is going to be excluding, once again, less researchers, where countries, academic institutions, and the research community in general do not have any control beyond commercial agreements, beyond negotiations. And the ownership really determines the future of openness and the future restrictions and the future of academia. So this is not the solution. So equity must be in the discussion. Everybody agrees about that. But in order to achieve equity, we need to respect each other. We need to value us as equals. So for example, the strategies with waiver fees, that is one argument from transformative agreements, they are just patronizing strategies granted by the owner. So this is to reinforce the inequitable structural system. So I cannot really believe that this is the best that we can do as, so in this approach of commodification, the results are measured by, for example, the total number of articles in open access. And this is really worrying and concerning. For example, I read that one day, with more than 500,000 new research articles published openly through transformative agreements negotiated by institutions in 67 countries today, there cannot be doubt that transformative agreements increase global access to research. Oh my God, this is really hiding something very important behind. So, for example, we cannot measure the access to one single article, which is perhaps the currency of transformative agreements. Not because we are living in a world of connectivity. We need to think how an article is only a point of connection with other kinds of information, other articles, other different formats of knowledge being published and communicated, where one article is only a piece of that graph of knowledge. So in that graph of knowledge, it is not enough to have the article open. We need the possibility to process it, to interconnect it with other information. And this is, for example, in many cases, it is limited by commercial corporations. And anybody is discussing that. They only think that, well, it's open now, I can download a PDF, which is sometimes not processable, well, sometimes it's in HTML, okay, but it's on structure. We cannot use it, for example, for artificial intelligence in the benefit of science itself, and many things that are restricted behind that. So we have to be very careful with that kind of, or measuring the success of open access and open science just like that. And in this sense, and I agree that libraries are key players and have a key role in the evolution of open science, should be very, very aware of that and take that with a pinch of salt, right? Just to say the minimum. So I wonder, for example, when an institution measured the success of open access just by how many open access articles are available, if there is an investment in non-commercial publishing, for example, library publishing, for example, the creation or strengthening of non-APC journals, what is happening with that? So if we are only thinking or in spending the budgets in transformative agreements, what is happening with the creation of infrastructure within institutions, within countries, regional. So we need infrastructure. So the market will empower only the same players by this kind of solutions. So definitely there are better ways to achieve a true open science where everyone has the same opportunity to be part, to publish and to read. And it is not as easy as that. It's not a dichotomy, but it's just for didactic purposes. But we really believe that this approach can be better, healthier for the ecosystem. But we need to think that academic institutions, the research sector, have really the ownership and the control of the sector. We need immediate open access. It cannot be based on APC. And we need as well responsible research assessment, as the Declaration of San Francisco already told us about. But also, and a key component that sometimes is not being discussed, and now I put my hat of engineer, it is technologically leveraged. It is really the key piece that can help us to democratize knowledge, because we now have technologies. Without technology, we weren't able to do that. So with this approach, we really think that we can really achieve a more equitable, we can go towards at least to epistemic justice with this approach. And this is something that has been happening in Latin America. Well, it's not perfect, but this is, and perhaps you are aware about that, but this is really working more as an ecosystem where different players, different initiatives, hundreds of publishers, hundreds of universities are supporting Diamond Open Access and institutional repositories. We have almost, well, more than 12,000 online journals, 63 mandates, for example. So we have really an infrastructure, a regional infrastructure of different initiatives and different services and investment in the academic sector that is serving open access in particular, but now open science in general. This is an ecosystem where everybody has benefit. It's a collective benefit, not only for the Latin American people. So, for example, we can see an increasing number of Europeans publishing in Diamond Open Access journals in Latin America, and they don't pay anything. So the regional infrastructure is supporting the publication of many authors around the world. Sometimes we think that we are, living in silos, but this is not true. We are really providing this service for everybody with this universal benefit, but with this distributed investment, which is not easy to understand, which is complex, because sometimes a fee for publication is easy to understand for a funder, and I know that. And for example, the case of this kind of investment is really more complex. It is many public budgets involved, from governments, from universities, from different infrastructures, from funders. So it is really a complex of investment, which is not easy to understand. And sometimes it doesn't help to really, this complexity doesn't help to live the idea or to attract more funds, because people don't understand this complexity. So lessons learned from the commercial sector in the global north. Well, the academic sector lost the control of scientific publishing. Commercial publishers took the control, and then with open science happened the same. So I don't know, I don't understand. Okay, but this is the thing, and perhaps the most concerning situation is that we are living now in an inflationary market of APCs, and it's a reality. Let's face it, just call it like that. It's impossible for anybody from the global south to pay the amount of APC costs that are now in many journals. And this is very tied to the industry of prestige, which is only reinforcing this circuit. So it's up to us. It's up to us which approach, and it's not only two options, but it is more complex like that, of course, but it's up to us. It's up to us, for example, as a researcher, for example, as a library, in every decision that we make, we can really take one route or other route. I like to think open science like a route. So we decide which way we can take every day. And it's very difficult. I sometimes receive invitations from journals from these commercial publishers, and then I have to, say no, Kathleen, because this is not the channel where I believe I can really communicate my research findings. But I know this has a community of readers, so it's difficult to be apart from that. So it's complicated, but we can do it. Well, this is the spirit of Budapest Open Access Initiative from the last year. And then it really reinforced this spirit of the first one, but then it says that open access is not an end. So we cannot keep counting the success of open access in total amount of open access articles. Sorry about that. It is not an end in itself, but a means to further ends. And then here it comes equity, quality, usability, and sustainability, and more values of science that are very aligned with science. The UNESCO recommendation is exactly in the same spirit, and I really like that. Open science is defined as an inclusive construct. So if we need to really make something better, we need to construct. We need to construct keeping that in mind. And we need to deconstruct some precepts and preconceptions that we have that are very damaging to really make something better. We perhaps need to think on different aspects. Sometimes mainstream versus peripheral science, it's these kind of concepts are sometimes coming from the commercial sector. It's good for them to call mainstream to what is being circulated in their channels, but mainstream for whom? Mainstream for who has the power to pay. So is it really mainstream? For example, when we had a project with the Angola government and Angolan universities to draft a piece of law to adopt national open access at national level. And researchers in Africa said, well, I don't read that, they don't read me, but my mainstream is what I'm doing every day with my colleagues of my country trying to save lives because we have malaria or we have different illnesses and different problems. So my mainstream is this one. So this is very relative, and it's very dangerous to call it like that mainstream to the knowledge that is being circulated only in commercial channels, for example. And also the problems with APC are not price, are not inflation, are not transparency. The root of the problem is the commodification, the ownership, and the control. So if we really think that the problem is that, then the root of the problem needs to be addressed in other ways rather than only pay and try to negotiate better prices. Latin America is the living example of publishing infrastructure sustained collectively by the academic system. So this is not something utopical. It is happening, but it's not recognized. This is the difference. Open access, for example, have an unprecedented legal constitutional support in Mexico, and this is some good news that I want to share for those who missed it. 2 years ago in Mexico, they introduced the concept of open access in the Constitution in a reform on Article 3, which is regarded to education. So now it's and open access, the open access is a right as part of the Constitution. So I don't know any other country. I hope there are more countries like that really can legislate at that level. But unfortunately, this is not aligned with the practical things that are happening in Mexico. So we have two disconnected, and I think this is the situation in many countries, disconnected mandates and legislations with practical implementation of open access and open science. For example, in Latin America, and particularly in Mexico, we are seeing, let's see, the commodification of science, because for the first time last year, we have now transformative agreements in Latin America, which is kind of absurd, because we have a really strong sector of journals and journals that have really been the media for communication of science for Latin American people and Latin American researchers. But the industry of prestige have misled researchers to think that they need to publish in those journals. So now we have these transformative agreements because this damaging industry of prestige that has encouraged researchers to publish in other journals because of impact factors, and you know about that. So this is very complicated, because now we are seeing that resources which are very limited, by the way, in Latin America are being directed, and budgets in libraries are being now spent in transformative agreements instead of, and this is very important to highlight, instead of strengthening diamond open access and green open access as well. So this is very concerning. So let's really open our minds and don't think that the map is the territory. If we see the map as a territory, we are doing something very wrong. This is, for example, the map that based on Scopus, for example, the citations from Scopus, and where the global south don't even exist. and people think that this is the territory. This is the problem. This is the map that has been drawn from Scopus citations, but this is not the territory. So we have to be very careful. For example, this is the map from collaboration, author collaboration, author co-authorship from Diamond Open Access Journals in Latin America indexing Redalyc. So this is really different, right? It is a channel that it is being used to communicate research by others rather than the North. So we have to really think in that when we have to spend, for example, our budgets, where we want to select or choose a journal where I want to communicate something. So the global village of knowledge, which is perhaps a utopical concept, but it is very well reachable, let's say. We live in a world of connectivity. It is possible to connect published knowledge for the universal benefit. And it is happening. This is the thing that is happening, but it's not being recognized. For example, this complementarity from green open access and diamond open access that we are working in Latin America recently. Last year we were working on that. So to share and to integrate services from diamond and green open access with La Referencia and Redalyc. You know, La Referencia, this network of national networks of repositories, and Redalyc that has almost 1,500 open access diamond peer-reviewed journals from all over the world. So we process information, and we take all those articles that are not available in institutional repositories, that are published in journals, that really come back to the repository, to the community who produce that knowledge, and then have access to that. So we implement or develop different services, software services, to populate institutional repositories, to populate national repositories, networks of repositories, through different data normalization. So, and this is very interesting because it can be used also to populate some research system in order to really impact in research assessment in the future. And just allow me 3 slides just to talk about what we are doing in Redalyc, just to use it as an example that it is possible to really build infrastructure for the benefit of all. This infrastructure that has been created in 2003, so we are just in our 20th anniversary this year, supports academia and non-profit scholarly publishing by providing technology and different services, including training, for example, and different added value services that a journal can have in order to strengthen its capacity, its visibility, interoperability, discoverability. We also provide journal production tools, quality certification, and this is something that it is not sometimes very well known, but we every day we are working with journal editors, assessing the quality of the journal, providing feedback, and this is like a silent work that we do as a community with different workshops and everything. But this is something that really can happen when we think that if they benefit, we all benefit from that. So, this is just a quick example of all those services that we are providing to journals, but also to institutions, to governments, and to different actors that we really believe need to be involved in order to foster the non-commercial sector of publishing. We also invested a lot in developing technology. For example, we are using artificial intelligence for lowering the cost of journal production and increase the capacity of text to be connected and to be discovered. So we have spent a lot of time developing this, and this is, for example, this system is used by more than 600 journals in Latin America, journals that don't want to outsource their workflow processes or workflow editorial services to commercial services, and then come to Redalyc to use this technology. And the commitment is that everything is, of course, open access, immediate open access, that don't charge APC. And this is a very important thing, that we are kind of subsidizing that many journals now are with this, tempted to adopt APC business model, and then need to be supported by different things in order to prevent that. So you can quantify that work in terms of money. For example, only the markup in XML would cost in the commercial market more than $10 million. And this is something that we are doing collaboratively between infrastructures and institutions and editorial teams within the journals. And this is, for example, something that I remind that this is not also very, very well understood. For example, in a non-commercial journal, the people who is working in the editorial teams, in many cases, are students, graduate students that are inserted in editorial teams, and the commercial sector likes to call them, volunteers, and just to make this idea that this is not good, this is not sustainable, this is not professional, and this is not true. This is exactly the opposite, because this is exactly the way that this tradition has been alive for so many decades in Latin America, because new generations learn how to make a journal, sustain the publishing sector, and are part of the sector and keep this knowledge going. So this is why in Latin America we have a very vibrant community of editors, because it is like the academic sector. Well, just to resume the collaboration with La Referencia, this is it's something that it's now, for example, we have now 2 national repositories that are being using these services of interconnecting Diamond with green open access, because we believe that we can really think on an open science ecosystem where different non-commercial players can interact. And also, and this is very interesting, and that brings me to the last point that I made at the beginning, that non-commercial open science can really be part of this linked open data cloud, for example, something broader that can be interconnected. For example, we are working for the Sustainable Development Goals with different semantic collections that connects in a transversal way the knowledge that has been published by all those journals that are indexed. So we can have, for example, one collection on climate action, and this is articles that have the possibility to be processed, to be connected, to be part of something broader, because this is a structured data based on XML and RDF and different formats. So really they can provide more knowledge than what they have itself as an article, isolated article. So this is something that perhaps we cannot achieve with commercial open access APC based, because we are only paying an APC to have this single article openly available. And we have, for example, different programs that have been working also with, and it is very important to highlight, there are different regions that are not adopting, for example, the Global South in Africa. They are not, really don't have this clear idea that they need infrastructure, because sometimes these waiver strategies don't allow to see exactly what the problem is. We developed a program, special program for vulnerable journals, and this is a very good program because we are trying to prevent the APC adoption, but also to flip from journals that are APC now to eliminate the APC policies. But they need services and infrastructure that support different parts of the workflow so they can do that. And we also work with Angola to roadmap for a national law regarding diamond open access. We really believe that we need to include diamond and green and non-commercial open access and open science in our policies, because if we don't do that, we are leaving a very big room, and we don't know what can happen, or maybe we know what is happening with that big room. So, okay, and I also want to highlight this. Diamond open access could act as a market force in regions with high dependence on APC-based or subscription-based journals. It is a natural regulator for commercial market, for prices and oligopolies. I don't like to think Diamond as that, but it could act as that, really. And sometimes I think governments and institutions don't see that. So if we really build and strengthened institutional and national, regional infrastructure, we could really fight against the economies of scale and the oligopoly that is happening, and that is there is a high dependence from governments to that. Well, so I start closing, I think. I don't know. I can keep going. Okay. Open science as a way to achieve science as a global public good. From our perspective, we need to prevent APC adoption, and it is very concerning because many journals in Latin America are now adopting APCs. And this situation is discouraging governments and institutions to keep supporting them as a non-profit, because they say, okay, you charge an APC, you don't need me anymore. And this is not true. We are losing our infrastructure, and this is very, very concerning. We need to strengthen this non-commercial openness, we need also to reform research assessment to really include the correct language in that, because if not, it's complicated. I would like to think that really open science, with that mindset, prevents science publishing to be commodified, allows the research community to own, control, and lead scholarly communications. It doesn't involve hidden restrictions, embargoes, deposit, data mining, text mining, artificial intelligence processing, etc., that are hidden behind the commercial solutions. It ensures long-term openness, which is also very important. Full text and data processability also allows knowledge discovery, optimization of editorial workflows, innovation of research assessment, innovation in metrics. All those can be achieved if we have plenty of permissions to really process the information, which is not happening from the commercial sector. So we need to really think in what data the industry of prestige is founded, which regions, countries, science fields, journals are being excluded by commercial open access, which inequalities we are perpetuating by current decisions. Is openness structural? Is openness sustainable? Or only I have this budget this year and then I pay for these articles, but it is not sustainable. It is not structural. We need to think on structural solutions in order to have really the future more secure in that sense. And there are many dimensions that we need to work. It is not done. The potential of diamond is huge, but we need to have or to do many things. Of course, in terms of strengthening different services, capacity building, multilingualism, to really build community around non-commercial open science. But there is a sustainability model on non-commercial open science. Some people like us to believe that there's no business model, sustainability model, I prefer, in the non-commercial sector, but this is not true again, because it is the model of academia, it is the model of research, it is the model as a global public good, it is the model of public education, for example, that has prevailed in Latin America for many decades. So there is a sustainability model who has been sustaining non-commercial publishing in particular. So policies must consider sustainability, ownership, equity, and open access as a human right, of course. And I promise I almost finished. Just some tasks or roles that I think stakeholders can be with the opportunity to do to strengthen diamond and non-commercial, the non-commercial sector in general, from libraries, governments, open infrastructures, institutions, funders, the research community, everyone. We have really the possibility and perhaps the duty to do something about that. And perhaps the main takeaway is that why not to address the root of the problem? This is perhaps the particular reflection that I want to bring to the table. So not to put some patch at the end of the, or to give an aspirin for the headache, but to address the root of the problem. So it is possible to have quality publishing on a not for-profit basis. Yes, it is. And it is of quality, and it is professional, and it is sustainable, and it is happening. We only need to recognize it. In a collective approach for the benefit of all, the transformation to open also presents an opportunity to reimagine scholarly communication, to return to the essence of science. The essence of science is to provide everything in our hands for the common good, right? A future where diamond and green and perhaps many others have much to contribute but we really need to perhaps rethink what we are doing as a society currently. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arianna, for that fantastic presentation. I knew it was going to be excellent, but you even exceeded my expectations, so thank you. So we would like to open it up to questions. So I will start with one that we have online and then maybe give the folks in the room a chance to collect their thoughts, get over the excitement of all the ideas that have been flowing around and put something into words. So we have a question about universities are still driven by university rankings. Publishing in top journals is still an important key performance indicator. Are there case studies which we can learn from to help facilitate cultural change?
Yes, it's a great question because it's not only a cultural issue. It is more complex than that because I really think that, the commercial sector has all the power and money to make a very good lobbying with governments and with institutions that perhaps don't have all the information to make a decision. So sometimes it is not only the research, the researcher decision where to publish because their salaries depend or their funds depend on that. So we really need to involve decision makers and high-level discussions to really let them know that this is happening. And if they only, as I said before, encourage researchers to go that way, they are going to really make the problem huge. That happens in my university as well. My university has, for example, more than 10 excellent journals published and sustained by a public university where I work. But then the university has been changing gradually the research system and then the recognition of the journals that used to be important are not. So are not anymore. So they are asking to publish in commercial journals, and they are now need to pay for that publishing open access, and then it will come the transformative agreement later. So it is really, a circle of unfortunate events. And this is very, very complex, and I think the discussion should be broader than not only with the experts, not only with the research community, but broader. And I didn't use this.
There's still time. So those are excellent points, and certainly kind of the points you made, I was really pleased to see you highlighting the importance of indexes. So I talk about this a lot, and it's finally people started to get on board with me on why the indexes are so important because of that structural thing, but it's the indexes help provide visibility to the research going. And it's not that there's research not going on, exactly like you showed, and in these other parts of the world, is that the indexes we have chosen to use, it is invisible to those. So even for researchers, say, in places like MIT, by using those indexes, we do our community a disservice because they cannot see all of the research that's going on, and particularly for the issues that we are facing with climate change and various kind of medical issues. It's critical that we have the accurate visibility of research.
Exactly.
So,
and this is where libraries can do a lot. Yeah.
So, Thanos?
Wear my chief librarian hat rather than MOC hat. So, I'm circling back to the question of yesterday, what libraries can do. So the Dag Hammarskjöld Library has been, since 1946, creating a thesaurus, which is available in the 6 official languages. In the last 3 years, we created a linked data ontology of the SDGs, more or less a filter that can be used on repositories. And I'm looking forward to discussions with both of you that we could filter content based on this sort of like tagging system or an ontology, if you will, which is linked with the official SDGs, the targets and the indicators, and has been approved by the Central Executives Boards, and it's been used widely across the UN system. So I just thought, why don't we open that into the repository?
May I have
right?
it?
So you have, right? You have, so it's the time to. So I mean, in a sense, that can be used. So you have already something in the 6 official languages, which has been more or less bulletproofed by my stellar team of indexes. And I think definitely this could easily also help you show the SDG impact of the Redalyc, or the SDG impact of +1, and so on, and other repositories. So there, another role for librarians. I think I'm sorry for that.
So I'll go to another question we've received from online, and it's potentially a provocative one. So do we really need journals to publish research in 2023, or are they just a tool of status and a historical relic?
It's not provocative. I have the answer for that. Well, I believe that we live in a diverse environment now. Technologies allow us to communicate in different formats, in different ways. We work with journals. We are not thinking that this is the only approach to do that. But I still believe that there is a very valuable work from the collective effort of a journal. And this is something that it's, and I have learned that this is something that is seen different from the non-commercial sector compared to the commercial sector. I mean, in Latin America, a journal is seen like a common good, like the air or like the water, yeah? So, for example, a journal editor knows that he works temporarily in a journal that is supported by a community of authors, readers, and a university, and this is something that serves something broader than their professional careers, for example. And this is, I think, not the same perspective or the same value that a journal can have from the commercial sector, which is, in the commercial sector, you see a journal with branding, with prestige, with impact factor, with like a customer service, but not really as a common good. So I still believe in this spirit of journals, and I think that journal, or perhaps make a journal, I don't know what it's going to be, how it's going to evolve. But I still believe that the contribution of researchers as part of the community or this common good, which is a journal, is still valuable for science.
I would say our experience, lots of startups or new initiatives, new ideas get brought to us in the MIT libraries to try to see if we are able to fund. Many of them have the infrastructure aspects that you talk about. But in our experience, what is really going to determine whether they are successful in the long term, particularly with the incentive structures kind of pushing against it in the other way, is a sense of community. And I think kind of what you're touching on is, for lots of disciplines, their journal is their community, at least for in the non-commercial sense. And they are personally attached to it. They care about it, they care about the quality, they care about the reproducibility in a way that in a commercial entity, that sense of community gets kind of papered over and saying, oh, but it has a high impact factor. But you don't know where the data is for all the stuff that they've published, right? So I think there's definitely that thing about the journal is the connection with the community, and that is a critical thing for anything that we are going to try to do to do things in a different way.
And if I may, just a quick comment, it is also a living entity that records the history of a scientific field that can be processed with ontologies or perhaps something different, but it really records the history. Mm-hmm. So this is broader than, yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. And while you're waiting, could I just ask you to introduce yourself before you ask the question? Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Melissa Hagman with the Budapest Open Access Initiative, and thank you, Arianna. That was an amazing talk. I really enjoyed it. You emphasized that APCs are destroying the diamond model in Latin America. What more could the global research community do to support the diamond model and to hopefully try to export it to other places in the world?
Thank you for the question. Well, I think that we should start from recognizing the quality and the role that Diamond Open Access has been contributing to the development of communication of science. So I think this is not recognized in universities, in different strategies. So we need to start from the recognition. Because if we start from that and we align our policies of research assessment, for example, to that vision, then we are doing justice for for Diamond Publishing. Because I think if policies are not aligned, it's very difficult. I mean, I can say, okay, you can contribute to a journal or to infrastructure and put some money there, some funds in there. But we need to look for something more structural and more sustainable, long-term sustainability, I mean. So in this sense, we need, for example, if universities from the global north, and I'm in the global north now, so I can say that, recognize, for example, indexes from the global south that are of quality, that have this proven quality, and that really can say researchers, you can publish in here, because it is the same or even sometimes higher quality than other journals that are being indexed in commercial solutions. So if we start with that, then we will have this more dynamic publishing system that it is not mainstream, peripheral, that it's more dynamic in that sense. So I think as an effect of that, it's going to be supported organically. But well, it is important also to perhaps sometimes in Latin America there are programs at national level that provides resources for specific tasks, specific things that journals need, for example. This is something good to have as part of the open science strategies at national level to always include the non-commercial solutions in their planifications.
Tying on to that, the question of indexes, it makes my heart so happy. You have no idea to hear about indexes talked about extensively. So there are the indexes that you've mentioned in Latin and South America, but there's also so much that can be done with OpenAlex, the open metadata. And I think of kind of for the indexes to create that global visibility, open metadata is a critical part. And as far as other kind of indexes, at least that I'm aware of, and I'm sure there's going to be many great things built on OpenAlex. The Lens is one in particular that is open, that as if you're looking for a more global representation, that's an excellent one. Heather?
Thank you. Thank you, Arianna, for a great talk. I'm so appreciative of you, well, for many reasons, but for reminding us that open science is really about reform on a systemic level. And I was struck by a couple of things in your talk about the places where we still have a disconnect in terms of creating the systemic change. And the fact that in Mexico you were able to get open access to scientific research enshrined in the Constitution as a right. And yet we still have, on sort of the grassroots level, the operations that are moving in an opposite direction, right? We have this gap, right, in terms of what our aspirations are on a policy level. They've been articulated and accepted, and yet the practice isn't catching up, and in some cases we're seeing it go in the opposite directions. I noticed on your slides that while we're talking about reforming research assessment kind of at the impact factor and individual journal ranking level, you used university rankings several times on your slides. And to me, that occupies part of that midsection that we don't really have a great strategy as a global community to address. And I'm curious if how you're thinking about this and if you're seeing any strategies for us to go directly at those rankings, which impact factors roll up into. So just curious for your thoughts on that.
Yes, we like to think that this is something. This must be collective. We cannot a university cannot do by itself an infrastructure or a journal. This needs to be a collective effort. And we like to think that, for example, we are working with various institutions in Latin America to provide cartographies of research publishing. And what is that? Is something that it doesn't give you the idea of this is a hierarchy list of something, right? But to have the picture, of what is happening with the knowledge published and the productivity of researchers and the productivity of scientific fields. So we can have more elements to help research assessment to be reformed. And in this sense, we think that it depends on each institution. For example, the very dangerous thing with university rankings is that first, it is the lack of transparency and the data that they use and everything around that, okay? But then they put everything in one place and with the same measure and with the same objectives. But for example, each university has its own objectives. So it should be measured in terms of their achievements. And rankings are not designed to do that. So we like to think that we can build collective cartography, so sharing data, sharing information, connecting this information to provide maps and to provide different ways to see how science is being developed. And then each institution can design its own assessment strategies in order to really be fair with their own objectives. This is, well, what I think.
Wait, your turns of phrases knock me out. So collective cartographies is now, it's in the lexicon. The industry of prestige going down in history. What was there was one other one that you used, it'll come to me, but yeah, thank you so much.
And as folks might be familiar, we're in that prestige kind of era. We benefit from that situation. And I think kind of in the conversations that we've been having, the place that we get the most traction of trying to encourage folks to think a bit differently is separating out what is really quality from prestige. Because prestige is a shorthand, right? It's because there's so much going on. You can't quite, research assessment. Isn't it easier to look at an impact factor than actually to read the article itself and try to figure out, is this good research or is it not? We have to slow down a bit and be able to take the time to make sure, and this is kind of the system that we have leads into poor science, poor research. This is why we have the reproducibility crisis. We're rewarding things that are flashy, quick, but not necessarily creating the kind of research we need to challenge the issues that we have, to affect climate change, to all the things that we've talked about that we need to be doing. So, and I think it's appropriate for those of us who have benefited from the prestige system to work a bit harder, to take that tension in the beginning, to try to change things, like for us in the libraries, of taking a look at how we look at collections, of spending our collections budget, and how can we start spending it on infrastructure, exactly the kinds of things that you've said are important. So it is possible. It is already being done. We're not even trying to blue sky, there are people doing this and doing this well. It's figuring how to change the flow of resources into the direction that we want it to go. Sorry, I'm monopolizing the moderation. Anna?
Yes, thank you very much. And this is really a great discussion. I wanted to get back to you a little bit, Arianna, about the sustainability model for non-commercial open science. And I think you said it's complex, you said it's complicated, but I think what we really have to do is unpack it and again, be very transparent in terms of what does it actually mean, who contributes and how. And particularly, on our side, we have to work with governments. We also get requests from universities who don't have a lot of resources and who really just want to understand what's the best way they can invest what they have. into which strategy for open science. So it's not necessarily, and sometimes they just don't know, and not even us have all the information that they might need to actually make a good decision or a decision that is. So I would really actually make a call to try to unpack that, and we can see how we can maybe even work on this together so that it is more understandable to a bigger audience, including those who make decisions about the fundings and the governments. You know, how can we do this? Who does have to be involved? How much do we invest? And how does that then contrast with some other options and some other strategies? I think that's going to be very, very important going forward to keep, you know, advocating for, of course, the non-commercial aspects and promotion of non-commercial open science. So just,
if I may, I think something that it is, so sometimes little things can really do big things. I think that that if we include, for example, I always see reports of the success of open science and open access, but the indicators are not really, for example, taking into consideration the effort of a country, for example, in publishing journals. How many journals has a particular country in Diamond? Because the government is sustaining them, or perhaps the institution. So, or a university. Okay, my success in open science should be measured as well, including if I have journals and I sustaining those journals. So take into consideration all that contribution that is not visible, but it is money invested in there. So we need to value that. Yeah.
Yes, would you introduce yourself before the question?
Hi, I'm Lisa Hinchliff at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Arianna, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to hear you speak. As I was listening to the remarks that you made, one of the things I was pondering in my head is that so many times when I hear scholars working in the same area from Europe or the United States, I hear that the alternative to the publishing system that we have commercially is the preprint ecosystem. And I'm struck that that's not a major component of what you're putting forward as really an alternative publishing system, not a sort of carve out the value sort of. So I'm wondering if you could share at all about your thoughts about where preprints fit in to your vision of the diamond model.
Yes, thank you for your question. I really think that are key pieces in the ecosystem. I refer to Diamond because I work with Diamond, but firsthand in the front line. But I believe that preprints can be, for example, a way to accelerate the communication of research and can really fit the Diamond system. So they can be, for example, peer review after a time. For example, what we are seeing a huge crisis in the in the diamond sector regarding the time between reception and publishing. So preprints can really impact very positively in that crisis. So I think it's something that needs to be developed by itself as a sector. And I think it's a complement to all the ecosystem that I described before. Yeah.
We might have time for maybe one more question.
My question was, Boyana Conforti, my question was also about preprints, because that seems very obvious to me in terms of getting the work out quickly and then layering any kind of evaluation of those preprints on top of the preprints, and so that becomes the version of record. And so, I think the first provocative question was, do we still need journals? Maybe not.
Okay, I think I already answered that question, but I maybe not, maybe yes. But the important thing is that we keep in mind that open science is something broader than journals, repositories, preprints. It's not a fight among the different formats. It's let's think on the spirit, and if we have that spirit in mind, I think if we evolve in something different, it is fine. Unless we always keep in mind the common good. This is my perspective.
And I think the question of preprints is interesting. And looking at high energy particle physics, the part of the reason that arXiv was created was speed, right? So there is the opportunity of like looking at the disciplines of how they think their discipline is best served. So the problem, one of the problems that you mentioned with the big commercial publishers is they have gobbled up everything. You have publishers with portfolios of thousands of journals in all sorts of discipline. How do you know those journals and the researchers and the research it represents is being well served? There is the opportunity by creating alternative pathways that scholars will find a way, because scholars, they care deeply about what they're researching. They've dedicated their lives in many cases to it. What we need to do is provide a broader array of opportunities of different pathways. And when they find one that works, they're going to tell their colleagues. They're going to build a community around it. And maybe it's a journal, maybe it's not. Maybe it's something else entirely. But of providing diversity in opportunities and pathways, like with diamond or green, or who knows what other color we're going to come up with eventually. So, but I think there's the opportunity of not working so hard to try to necessarily push in one direction. If you provide the opportunities, and if we can chip away at the incentive structures to loosen up folks being able to experiment and saying, you know what, we set up this process in 1950, it's not working for neuroscience anymore. There's better ways that we could be doing this. And then we have the ways to resource that. So I think you've given us a lot of examples, and it's not a technical issue, exactly like it's possible. It's just we need the will and the ability to move the resources we currently have in those directions. And with that, I will turn it over either to, are we still on time? We've got 1 more minute left before 10:20.
Maybe Arianna would like to wrap up.
Yes. Arianna, do you have any closing thoughts for us?
You have time? Well, no, I think we discussed a lot, and thank you very much for the rich discussion. We really need a lot of minds and ideas to make something better. And I think we are all here for that, but it's not easy. But thank you so much.